Hi everybody, this is the Baseball of Height, the amazing, spectacular, terrific, the great one, the People's Champion. Your host, the Hud. Welcome back to the Baseball Hud. Hopefully you like this video and hit that subscribe button. I have sort of been very reluctant about this because I've been very much against it. But now we've gotten to a point now in the baseball season that the team, I have my concerns. So when I get these concerns, I start to talk about it, and one thing leads into another. And I was thinking about this thought about Pete Alonso, and I was reading some things today. The list obviously that go out online is one by the Bleacher Report. They run through all these players of who will get traded as the birds are chirping along. And they mentioned that Pete is the most obvious player to be traded at the trade deadline. He's the most obvious guy. Now, what kind of value are you going to get? Where could you possibly move Pete to? I had 3 teams that I could talk about in this video that would be landing spots for the polar bear. Now, before we get into this video, hit that subscribe button again, like this video, and we're going to get started right now. Now, the Mets are many games under 500. I think they're 21-27, 21-28, whatever it is. They just got swept by the Guardians. They lost 2 out of 3 to Miami. They had a terrible loss on Saturday where Edwin Diaz blew it wasn't even a safe situation. He came into the game and he just didn't have it. He has not pitched well. But one of the things we've been talking about since last August is the Mets were discussing with teams, looking to see what kind of value Mets first baseman Pete Alonso had, and they pulled him back. They also talked to the Cubs, they talked to the Brewers, and of course the Mets didn't trade him. And that discussion came out. I was totally flipping out about it because I thought it was crazy talk. But now we're getting closer to the fact that we're now getting close to Memorial Day weekend now. We're past the 40-game mark. We're getting close to the 50-game mark. This team does not seem to have any kind of wherewithal to sort of push forward and be better. In fact, they've been playing the same, really, particularly the everyday players, in the same way as they have in the past year. Francisco Lindor is spinning his wheels as a player. Jeff McNeil spinning his wheels as a player. You don't see any kind of pushing forward and performing better. And Pete Alonso has taken a step back as a player. His batting average has taken a step back. Now, the one thing I've talked about in the past, and I have mentioned several times, talking about Gary Carter and Mike Piazza, and I mentioned them not because they were catchers, it's more because they were power-hitting, right-handed hitters. And they were guys that were cleanup hitters. They hit for a higher average than Pete, by the way, at times. Gary Carter hit 294 as his career high, and obviously Mike Piazza hit 360-something one year with the Dodgers. So these are guys that have a high batting average guys. Pete is not. But when they started taking all the hits and over the years and all the wear and tear just as a catcher, but then as an everyday player as well, their batting average suffered. That's the one thing you see across all the players, really, is that, unless you're talking about a guy like Tony Gwynn, the batting average is an indication of a slower bat and obviously an indication of not being able to make adjustments or whatever it is. I'd have to dig deeper on it, but that's always an indication of a troubling situation. Keith Hernandez had the same thing. His batting average was starting to wane the last few years, too. So that's just an example of guys that were older, too. Now, Pete is only 30. He's going to be 31 in December. And the way baseball looks at first baseman, their value isn't what it was. And now we have a situation where the Mets are probably going to have to look to deal him just to get something in return. You're not going to get any premium prospect. I'm going to talk about a couple of guys here in this video, but you're not going to be talking about any kind of elite guy. There might be one guy here. We'll talk about it now, and that's what the Cubs. The Cubs have probably the best farm system of the 3 teams that I'm going to talk about in this video. Obviously, there's Pete Armstrong, who's in the major leagues right now. I wouldn't go after him. It's been there, done that. But the Cubs have a starter in their minor leagues called Cade Horton. I'm right, Cade Horton, and he's a right-handed pitcher. He's a guy that's could be considered a number 2 starter. For me, to get a good player, a good value for me would be a 1-for-1 deal or a 2-for-1 deal for Pete. I'd rather get 1 or 2 good prospects than get a 3 or 4 players that aren't nearly as good. We saw that with Goldschmidt. The Diamondbacks got 4 players back, but none of them are any good, and they kind of all got sent off to designated for assignment zone, and they never came back. But Cade Horton would be a guy that would interest me with the Cubs. Now the Mariners, that's another team that they're in first place in the American League West. They got good pitching, but they're really lacking in production offensively, and they really don't have anybody hitting at first base. Ty France is a disaster there offensively. What the Mets could get, I'd be more interested in getting a guy that's in their minor leagues. The thing that's interesting about the minor league system with the Mariners is that their top 10 players, all position players, they're outfielders, infielders, and catchers. There's no top 10 starter or pitcher that they have that would interest me, but they have a lot of infielders that could really help. And then there's, of course, the final team in this, and we're going to talk about that right here. And now the third team in this, and you'd be surprised about it, is the Houston Astros. Houston is now 4 games under 500. They got off to just a dreadful start. But one of the things they did in the first few weeks of the season is they sent down former MVP Jose Abreu to the minor leagues, which was a shock to a lot of people. And he's currently in the minor leagues. They have John Singletary, or Singleton, whatever the hell his name is, playing first base. So they don't really have a first baseman. They got a journeyman. So that is a team that they need a first baseman in the worst way. You need a first baseman in the worst way. I'll give you a name. He's an outfielder. He's a left-handed hitting outfielder. His name is Jacob Melton. And he's a guy that I think would interest the Mets. The Mets have obviously a good relationship with the Astros after making that trade for Verlander. And it seems that the Astros are starting to come back into the race. They're, like I said, only 4 games under 500. After the dreadful start that they had, it looked terrible. I saw the games against the Yankees. They looked terrible against the Yankees. But Pete would give them an infusion of power that they don't currently have. I said one thing about these teams that I've talked about in this video: the Cubs, the Mariners, and the Astros. They need another. They all need some power. They all have holes at first base. They need improved production at first base. And just maybe moving Pete would give him a little bit of a sort of a second life to his career. Like I said, I'd like to see Pete stay with the Mets, but the current situation, if it continues on this trajectory, it makes no sense to hold on to him. It makes no sense to sort of continue with this group of players that have not gotten it done over the last 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. Obviously, with Pete being here for the last 6 seasons, it hasn't worked. So you're gonna have to get to that point where you move Pete and you get some value. Like I said, the best value you could probably get is get a player 1-for-1 deal or a 2-for-1 deal for Pete. You'll get more out of it. There's no money exchanging hands with Pete, and these teams can decide whether they want to re-sign him. I think he would be a good fit with the Cubs long term. He would be a good fit with the Astros, even for this year. And the Mariners, that's a different story because they got a bigger ballpark. But he would be a great fit for the Cubs. And we'll see what happens. But this is sort of my thoughts on it. I went through the teams a little bit. I came across some teams that need a first baseman. The Mariners was a kind of a surprise. I heard them earlier, but the Astros were a surprise because obviously they don't have a first baseman. They don't have a regular major league first baseman. And obviously the Cubs have been after him for a while. I would mention the Brewers, but the Brewers signed Rhys Hoskins to a contract, a 2-year deal. That kind of takes them out of it. I know they were interested in Pete last year, but it'd be interesting if they were to do that. I don't know where that would go. But anyway, let me know what you think about this video. Of course, hit the subscribe button. And if you like what I have to say, send me a great donation in the form of a super thanks. You want to keep hearing the birds. The birds are back, baby. They never left. They were very quiet. I was doing the videos in the other room, but they loved hearing me churn out this stuff. And that's when they get louder. I'll tell you a story before we go. My friend came over before I moved, and we were talking in the house, and the birds kept chirping and chirping, and they were chirping louder as I was talking, and I was talking louder over them, and my lady friend got mad at me. She thought I was yelling at her. It's not me, it's them. Well, if you love them, send them a super thanks. It helps them get a new purchase. They love to chew those purchases up. A pain in the neck. I go to Petco all the time. Get purchase for them because they're just destructive. But anyway, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you later.